Good morning, boys and girls. I hope you are ready for another chapter. We are now on chapter 16, which is called Ditching the Darling. So last time we read, they were able to not get the masked man, but they found the book that he left behind to go into the next story. So, chapter 16, Ditching the Darlings. Alex and Connor stepped through the beam of light and left the witch's castle in the land of Oz behind. They waited as the words from the new story built an entirely new world around them. The Tin Woodman, Red, Mother Goose, and Lester arrived a moment later and observed their newest location in wonder. Extraordinary, the Tin Woodman said. I've never seen a place like this. It's spectacular, Red said, and placed a hand over her heart. Look at all the elegant buildings, the lamps, the paved streets. I wasn't expecting Neverland to be so sophisticated. Guys, this isn't Neverland, Connor said. We're in London. They were standing in a small square park bordered by streets and rows of tasteful townhouses. It was very late and all the street lamps were lit. The twins were very amused by how much the classic English neighborhood enchanted their friends. The Tin Woodman and Red didn't care what this place was called. It was still just as marvelous and foreign as anything else they might have seen. Hello, London, Mother Goose said. Boy, we've had some good times here, haven't we, Lester? Lester nodded with large eyes. He remembered things very differently. Connor picked up the copy of Peter Pan and tucked it safely into Lester's saddle. A horse and buggy passed them on the street. The driver wore a tall top hat and had a thick mustache. Red and the Tin Woodman gave the driver a friendly curtsy and bow. He stared at them very strangely, as if his mind was playing tricks on him, and continued down the street without acknowledging them. What year does this story take place? Mother Goose asked. Is it before or after the Great Fire of London? Purely curious, not that I had anything to do with it. The early 1900s, Alex said. Mother Goose, have you been in this story before? Red asked. London is a city in the other world, and it's where this story begins, just like Kansas, Alex explained. Then I'm afraid to ask how we get to Neverland, Red said, already dreading it. Hurricane? Earthquake? Sinkhole? Of course not, Connor said. That would be ridiculous. We fly to Neverland? Fly what? Mother Goose asked. Mother Goose, I can't believe how unfamiliar you are with these stories, Connor said. After all the time you spent in the other world, how do you not know about Peter Pan? I was too busy spreading stories with your grandmother and the other fairies to read any of them, she said. So who is this Pan fellow? Is he a pilot? Right now, he's our only hope of finding and stopping Uncle Lloyd, Alex said. Come with me. We've got to look for him. Alex hurried down the street, and the others followed behind her. She carefully looked over every townhouse they passed. Occasionally, she would climb over a gate and peer through a window to see the inside of a house. What are we looking for? The Tin Woodman asked. The Darling's house, Alex said. Peter visits the Darling's nursery in the beginning of the book. I should know it when I see it. Everybody quiet. Without warning, Alex pushed her brother and Red into the flower bed and dragged the Tin Woodman, Mother Goose, and Lester behind the pillars of the porch they were inspecting. A man and a woman emerged from the townhouse across the street. The man promptly locked the door of their home and escorted the woman down the street. They were dressed up in a suit and gown and were in mid-conversation. I'm telling you, George, I know what I saw, the woman said. Mary, your imagination has run off with your mind, George laughed. I was not imagining it, Mary insisted. Last night, after I read the children a bedtime story, as I sat sewing while the children fell asleep, I saw him, a boy outside the window of the nursery. My dear, there is nothing outside the window of the nursery but air, George said. Then he was floating, Mary said. Nana saw him too. She snapped the window shut and he disappeared. Imagine that, George said. Don't mock me, George. I wouldn't say such things if they weren't true. Anyway, he left his shadow behind. I put it in a drawer for safekeeping. I do suppose he'll be coming back for it. His shadow? George couldn't believe the words coming out of his wife's mouth. Mary, I've heard enough. You've been cooped up with the children for far too long, and you need a break. Now, let's enjoy the rest of our night without any more talk of such nonsense, I beg you." George and Mary turned the corner and disappeared down another street. "The wife sounds like a loon," Mother Goose whispered. "No, she's telling the truth," Alex said. "Any minute now Peter Pan and a pixie named Tinker Bell will appear at the windows of the nursery. I have to admit, I'm excited to see them." Everyone stared at the tall windows at the very top of the townhouse and waited for the boy and the pixie to appear. They waited and waited, but nothing was happening. They watched the windows until their necks started to ache. The others had seats on the steps of the townhouse, but Alex stayed put. She wasn't going to miss anything. "Any minute now," Alex said cheerfully. "We'll grab him, ditch the darlings, and head to Neverland." A couple of long hours later, there was still no sign of Peter Pan or Tinker Bell. Then they heard a couple of voices, and everyone's heart jumped. This was it. They quickly resumed their positions behind the pillars and in the flower bed. However, it was only George and Mary returning to the street on their way home. "This isn't right," Alex said. "They're not supposed to be back yet. Peter Pan should have taken Wendy, Michael, and John to Neverland by now." As Mr. and Mrs. Darling walked up the front steps of their townhouse, Connor felt a soft breeze. He looked down the street and saw a young boy peeking out from behind a neighboring townhouse's chimney. He flew from one chimney to the next, creeping closer to the Darlings' home. "Guys," Connor whispered. "Look, it's Peter." They all turned in the direction Connor was pointing and saw the boy who wouldn't grow up himself. He had messy auburn hair, rosy cheeks, and clothes made of green and brown leaves. Peter hovered behind the chimney of the Darlings' neighbor's house until George and Mary went inside their home. As soon as they shut the door, he dashed to the windows of the nursery, all the while never casting a shadow on anything below him. Alex pointed at the window, and it locked before Peter got there. He pulled on the window, but it wouldn't budge. He grew very worried and looked inside. When he didn't see anything moving, he lightly knocked on the glass. "Tink," Peter whispered. "Tink, are you in there? Did the woman trap you with my shadow?" When there was no response, Peter's posture sank and he dropped a few feet in altitude. He quickly flew off into the night, searching the sky and streets around him. "After him," Alex told the others. "We can't lose him." They followed Peter on the streets below, chasing after him as if he were a loose balloon. It became increasingly difficult to keep up with him. The longer he searched, the less inclined he was to stay in line with the streets. He flew over several streets at once, jumping from neighborhood to neighborhood. "We're not going to Oh, sorry, boys and girls. "We're not going to find him at this rate," Red said. "I agree, we're rats in a pigeon chase," Mother Goose said. "Lester, fly after him." "Wait," Connor said when something caught his eye. "Look over there." He pointed to a small park in the center of the neighborhood. Peter Pan was sitting on the very top of a statue. His face was buried in his crossed arms, and he appeared to be crying. The twins and their friends snuck into the park as quickly and quietly as they could, which was especially difficult with the Tin Woodman's heavy metal boots. "Should I say something to him?" Connor asked. "No, let me," Alex said. "I know exactly what to say." She tiptoed right up to the statue where he was seated. Peter was so upset he didn't hear her coming. "Boy, why are you crying?" Alex asked, quoting the story she knew by heart. She startled him, and Peter abruptly shot into the air. When he saw she was just a girl, he posed in midair with his hands on his hips and slowly descended to the ground. "Who are you?" Peter asked. "My name is Alex," she said, "and these are my friends." She gestured to her brother and the others, and they walked farther into the park. "Pirates!" Peter screamed when he saw them. He shielded Alex and pulled out a small dagger. "Don't worry, Alex. I shall protect you." "These aren't pirates. These are my friends," Alex said. "They aren't going to hurt anyone." "All adults are pirates," Peter said, and waved his dagger at Connor and the others. "But I'm only like a year or two older than you," Connor said. "I'm only like a year or two older than you," Peter repeated with a funny voice and ugly face. Are you mocking me? Connor asked. Are you mocking me? Peter said. Dude, stop it. Dude, stop it. Gosh, you're immature. Gosh, you're immature. Connor was beyond annoyed and grunted heavily. I know staying young is your thing, but you really need to grow up, he said. I know staying young is your thing. Peter stopped mimicking him and looked at him curiously. Wait, how did you know that? Alex took this as an opportunity to reposition herself between Peter and the others. We know all about you and Neverland, she said. We were waiting for you at the Darlings' house, but you were super late. Well, later than you were supposed to be. What took you so long? Peter put his dagger away, but continued to eye them curiously. I was looking for Tinker Bell. She's a friend and a pixie. Last night, Tink and I were listening to Mrs. Darling read a fairy tale to the children. Mrs. Darling saw me outside the window, so I left in a hurry. I left so fast, my shadow stayed behind. Usually Tink is right beside me, but I couldn't find her anywhere. I've searched the entire city, but she's gone. Do you have any idea where Tinker Bell might have gone? Alex asked. Would she have gone back to Neverland? Connor asked. No, Tink doesn't like to fly alone, Peter said sadly. Now I'm all alone without a pixie or a shadow. Why is this shadow such a big deal? Connor asked. Peter looked at him as if he had insulted a family member. A shadow is a friend that never leaves you, he said. But yours did, Connor pointed out. It wasn't his fault, Peter said. He was hoping the Darling children would wake up and their mother would read them another bedtime story. Shadow loves fairy tales. A perky smile came to Red's face. Which fairy tale was it? She asked, and ran her fingers through her hair. Cinderella, Peter said. Red slumped. Oh, she said with a disappointed sigh. You didn't miss much. She dies in the end. Peter's mouth was agape, and his eyes became watery. Alex grabbed Connor's arm and pulled him aside. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? She asked. This kid is psychotic? He asked. No, about Tinker Bell, she said. It's not a coincidence she came up missing the same time our uncle entered the story. Oh, right, Connor said. Obviously Lloyd kidnapped her. He probably used her pixie dust to travel to Neverland and recruit Captain Hook. That's not all he's using Tink for, she said. Just like he used the silver shoes on the Wicked Witch, he's got to have leverage to bargain with Hook. And what does the captain want more than anything? He wants to kill Peter, Connor said, trying his best to remember the story. Uncle Lloyd's going to give Tinker Bell to Captain Hook so he can use her as bait for Peter. Precisely, Alex said. The twins quickly rejoined their friends and the age-defying boy. Peter, we know where Tinker Bell is, Connor said. Where? Peter asked. He was so excited he flew a few feet into the air and hovered right in front of the twins. A very bad man has kidnapped her, Alex said. He's using her to recruit Captain Hook and the pirates into a special army he's forming. Will you take us to Neverland? With your help, we might be able to stop him and save Tinker Bell, but we won't know until we get there. Of course, Peter said. Follow me. Peter shot into the sky like a rocket and disappeared from sight. He had completely forgotten to take the others along. This kid has some serious ADHD, Connor said. They waited for a few moments and were relieved when Peter finally returned. Sorry, I forgot to give you the magic pixie dust. Dust, he exclaimed. He reached into a small pouch on his belt and threw a handful of shimmering dust on each of them. Pow! Bam! Kaboom! Shazam! He said playfully, and pelted them with dust until he had none left. None for me, thank you, Mother Goose said when it was her turn. Last time I had pixie dust was 1964, and the next day I woke up on top of the Brooklyn Bridge with a tattoo of John Lennon on my ankle. If we're going to fly to Neverland, I'll just ride Lester. Suit yourself, Peter said. The rest of you think lovely, wonderful thoughts. This was easier said than done. The group had had an exhausting and stressful couple of days, and thinking of something cheerful enough to fill their bodies with joy was rather difficult. Oh, come on, Peter said. None of you can think of a single happy thought. You must be the saddest bunch I've ever met. But I can't think of happy thoughts, the Tin Woodman said. I would need a heart to do the whoa. Just by mentioning a heart, the Tin Woodman rose a few feet off the ground. He hovered with his limbs spread out like an astronaut and spun like a wheel. It was a very odd feeling, and he wasn't sure if he liked it. The twins and Red were very impressed by their levitating friend. Still, manifesting a thought of pure happiness was like finding water in the desert. Peter became antsy. He had never had such trouble teaching someone to fly before. If you can't think of happy thoughts, try thinking of a happy memory, he advised. I hope you had at least I hope you at least have one happy memory. They closed their eyes and searched their memories, looking for that one special moment in their past when they had been happiest. I'm thinking of the time Mrs. Peters told me I was a good writer, Connor said. I'm remembering the time when Grandma told us we had magic in our blood, Alex said. Alex and Connor slowly rose into the air and grabbed each other's hands to steady themselves. The weightless sensation made the twins laugh. They felt like they were swimming in a pool and on a roller coaster at the same time. Nice work, Peter said. Now it's your turn, Princess. It's Queen, thank you very much, Red replied. Red was having the most trouble of anyone, which wasn't surprising after the devastating week she had endured. She was afraid if she became too in touch with her emotions, she might sink into the ground instead. Come on, Red, Connor encouraged. You can do it. Forget about the wedding, Alex said. Remember the time you were the most happy. Red closed her eyes tightly. I'm thinking about the day I became queen of my own kingdom, she said. She opened one eye to see if it had worked, but sadly, she was still on the ground. A memory wasn't going to work for her. Everything she thought of only reminded her of Froggy and how much she missed him. So instead of looking into the past for happiness, Red looked into the future. I'm thinking about the day I get Charlie back and get to slaughter Marina like the cow she is, Red declared. The young queen propelled into the sky like a firework, screaming as she went, and rose higher than anyone. Her friends cheered and clapped for her. Red twirled through the air, fighting to keep the layers of her dress down. Eventually she managed to straighten herself out and looked down at the others in fright. She couldn't believe how high she was. And away we go, Peter said, and flew off into the night sky. Mother Goose hopped onto Lester's back, and they followed the boy. Alex, Connor, Red, and the Tin Woodman just bobbed up and down in the air like parade balloons. Floating was the easy part, but learning to fly took some work. At first, they tried swimming through the air, but they only tired themselves out. Eventually, they discovered that by putting pressure on their feet as if they were pushing against an invisible kickboard, they could maneuver through the air. A few moments into it, they got the hang of it and soared after Peter and Mother Goose. Peter definitely took the scenic route on the way to Neverland. They circled above the Tower of London and looped through the Tower Bridge, narrowly avoiding a steamboat passing under it. They flew above the Thames River as it snaked through the heart of the city. Peter got so close to the water, he splashed the twins behind him. They zigzagged through the steeples of Parliament and spiraled up to Big Ben. Peter playfully kicked the small hand of the giant clock, setting London back an hour and causing it to send a powerful chime through the city. Because of his size and stiffness, the Tin Woodman wasn't flying as agilely as the others and kept bumping into things. He ricocheted off the roof of Parliament like a pinball. Sorry, pardon me, excuse me, my fault, he apologized to the steeples and chimneys and flagpoles he slammed into. They flew down Whitehall and over St. James's Park and toward Buckingham Palace. Ooh, what is that? Red yelled when she saw the palace. That's Buckingham Palace, Alex said. It's where the monarchy resides. Red was mesmerized. What a stylish and tasteful place. Look at that beautiful statue out front in the middle of the street. That looks exactly like the statue I wanted to build in celebration of Charlie's and my wedding. Red left the others and flew down to the gate. She peered through the bars at the palace in delight. She had to hang on to the bars tightly because the fairy dust was making her drift back to the sky. One of the palace guards on duty saw Red and stared at her in disbelief. It wasn't every day he saw a floating woman at the gate. Yoo-hoo! Red called to him. I just love your hat. Please tell the current monarch that Queen Red of the Center Kingdom says hello." Connor flew to the gate and pulled Red's hands off the bars. "Red, come on, you're going to get left behind." The palace guard fainted, and Red and Connor rejoined the others. Peter led them higher and higher into the sky. They left London behind and headed for the stars. For a few minutes, the twins forgot all of their worries. They didn't feel the angst of tracking down their uncle, or the burden of stopping him, or the fear of what would happen if they failed. All the twins felt was freedom and the cool night air against their faces. Their spirits soared as high as their bodies. They shared a smile, knowing this was an experience they would remember for the rest of their lives. They looked back and saw not just London, but the whole world beneath them. They had left the Earth's atmosphere, but the air traveled with them. "Say, where is this Neverland anyway?" Mother Goose asked. "It's the second star to the right and straight on until morning," Peter called out. Just as he said it, an unusually bright star appeared in the night sky ahead. The closer they flew to the star, the more they could make out a small island floating in space. "We've made it," Peter Pan said. "Welcome to Neverland." Okay, that's the end. Bye, guys.